Welcome back to Danjo Trains. Today I'm happy to finally present the curved street running road plate. In this video, I'll cover the design process and the complications I had to go through. If we backtrack a moment, here's a digital render of downtown which I had previously designed in Studio. If you notice the intersection, there's a Y switch that goes both left and right. Since I had to design my road plate through a bit of trial and error, I decided to reduce the complexity of the problem by building one with a typical R40 curve first to make sure it was possible. So let's jump into the creative process. I started off in Bricklink Studio doing some design work. I had to plan the intersection around having an R40 curve track embedded in the pavement. Once the R40 curve was positioned correctly, I tile everything underneath so that the track has a base to rest on. You'll notice that there are red 1x1 studs mixed in with the tiles. This was done to make sure the track would be secured in place since the tiled surface is quite smooth. This technique was from a video I saw online by Dispersion. Once the tiling is complete, I check the placement of the track again to make sure that the tiles are placed correctly. Next, I try a collision test. This is a function in Studio that will let you know if two bricks are interfering with each other by graying them out. It's incredibly useful, especially if you like doing design work in Studio, but it's not perfect. So, with the collision on, right away I notice a couple of issues with the red studs. I decide to remove them in the model and test to see if they work on the real road plate. Next, we move on to the prototype. The green plates are used to hold the base plates together. At this stage, the design is quite flimsy. Considering the round 1x1 studs, I did some testing and found that they didn't cause any issues when placing the track down. Also, to save on pieces, I ended up cutting back on the amount of tiles that will go under the track. As you can see, the R40 curve goes down nice and flush. It's also quite secure in place, and I'm happy with the underbed covering just what's necessary. Now comes the big challenge, tiling the curved track. This would be a headache to do in Studio, so I decided to figure this part out through trial and error. Now, the main issue is the space between the plates. It's too small to be filled with a 2x4 tile. Next, if you decide to just tile the top of the track to cover the gaps, you'll find that there's just not enough space here either. This is why typically you'll see tiles covering just the area with studs to create a nice finish. However, since I don't want there to be any massive potholes in my streets, I'm going to have to come up with another solution. At first, I tried using simple combinations of 1x4 and triangular tiles, but I couldn't quite figure out a solution to get the gaps covered. Next, I went with something a lot more complicated. From the top, you can see that I've been able to cover most of the gaps using tiles, although they are somewhat crooked. If I remove the top layer, we can get a look at the underbed. Here, I use a system of jumper plates, regular plates, and tiles to support the tiles on top. Now, while better than my previous attempt, I found that this method uses just too many pieces, and personally I don't like the final look. That being said, if you're a LEGO purist, something similar to this is probably the way to go. But that is not what I decided to do. Since my priority with the design was having as smooth a finish as possible, I ended up using a non-LEGO approach. This is R40 Pavement by Trixbrix in dark grey. It's 3D printed and clips on over the studs. What I love about this solution is how it completely covers the gaps and accentuates the look of the rails. While this is my preferred solution, I do want to mention that these products are not perfect either. Out of the 8 that I purchased, some of them seem to fall off at the slightest touch. Other times, when trying to place the pavement down, it just does not want to stick at all and keeps popping back up. I imagine that this is probably a tolerance issue with the 3D printing. For example, here's another piece of pavement that sticks to the Lego with no issues at all. Now, before we get back to the road plate, I want to talk about one more tiling idea that I had. This is R56 track, slightly wider than what Lego makes. Recall that I said that the gaps on standard Lego track were too small to fit a 2x4 tile. With the R56 track, the gap is just the right size. This allows me to place tiles in the gaps, which can then be covered by more tiles on top. The final look here is quite refined, since nothing looks crooked or out of place. There's ample room for the train wheels to pass as well. All that being said, there's no way at this point that I'm going to completely redesign my city to accommodate wider track. Now, let's get back to the modular. I got started with some work off camera, and now it's time to assemble the rest of the road plate. So, remember earlier in this video when I discussed those 1x1 round studs that connect to the outer rail of the track? I removed them, and I'll explain why. When I started to assemble off camera, I had large sections that were not flush with the rest of the pavement. It turns out the 1x1 studs were lifting and distorting the track. So, now instead of being secured on the outer rail, the R40 track will only be connected at both ends of the road plate. Here and here. I'm not worried anymore about the track moving around, because the tiled pavement will actually hold it in place. Next, we add the rest of the Trixbrix pieces. These come in the kit and are meant to bridge the space between the round edges of the train tracks with the square shapes of the tiles. Trying to figure out where they go is a bit like doing a puzzle. This is the part I had the most fun with throughout the entire design process of this road plate. Now it's time to do a quick test. Here I'm making sure that the passenger car is not catching on anything and can roll smoothly. With the test complete, it's time to add the curved pavement sections to the track. As I mentioned before, there are 8 total, or 2 per section of R40 track. They clip down very easily, except for that one piece that I had that tends to pop out still. While I did most of this work off camera, I left a section unfinished to show you a bit of how the substructure works. The basic idea is that I have 2 small support plates underneath a large grey plate, which will get tiled. Here you can see me rearranging the smaller plates to be able to support a 4x8 plate. It's basically the same as when I did the straight sections of road plates in another video. The gaps that I couldn't cover with plates, I just filled with any pieces I had around. Now it's time to tile the rest of the road plate. This took some trial and error, and tiles of different shapes to accomplish. I'm using a mixture of 1x2, 1x4, 2x2, and 2x4 tiles. Unlike the straight road plates, where I only use 2x4 tiles, I will admit that this one doesn't quite have the same clean and finished look but this is also as close as I'm going to get, considering the fact that the track is curved. I also tried to include as many special printed tiles with the white stripe for the medians as possible. Since the modular is an intersection, you'll notice that the direction of the tiles changes to match the printed tiles. I was actually short by a single 1x2 tile at the end because someone had the audacity to steal it off the table.
Hello there.
Fortunately, I was able to negotiate its safe return. With the road plate complete, I want to give a little preview of how it looks next to a modular building. This is a mock of Sesame Street that I recently finished, which is meant to go in the corner of downtown. Let's see how they look together. That is perfect. But that's also all I have for today. In the next episode, we'll focus on assembling all the buildings of Main Street together, including the curved road plate. By the way, do you like how the curved road plate turned out? Let me know what you think in the comments below. Also, don't forget to like and subscribe. It definitely helps support the channel. See you next time!